Story number 1. I need you to understand something about canyons before I take you into the one that changed me. Before I put you in that raft with me and let the current carry us both into the place I am still trying to find my way out of in every sense that matters. I need you to understand that a canyon is not just a geological feature. A canyon is a commitment. The moment the walls rise up on both sides of you and the current takes you forward, you have made an agreement with the river, an agreement that says the river decides where you go and when you stop and whether you stop at all. And the only thing you bring to that agreement is your skill and your equipment and your knowledge of the water and the hope that all three of those things are enough. I have been whitewater rafting for 11 years. I have been in canyons before. I know what commitment feels like. I know the specific weight of being inside walls with no way out except forward, and I am comfortable with that weight. I have made peace with it over 11 years of learning to read water and trust my body and accept the terms of the river. But what I floated into on a June afternoon in a river system I thought I knew is something that no amount of skill or equipment or water knowledge prepares you for. Because what I floated into was not a canyon that the river had made in the ordinary geological sense of making. It was a canyon that something else had made, or had been made for something else, or had been used by something else, for long enough that the evidence of that use was carved into the walls from the waterline to 20 feet above my head, carved in the specific language of desperation, in the only vocabulary that a thing without tools has available to it when it needs to say something to the stone. Scratch marks. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Covering every accessible inch of wall surface, floor to ceiling of the reachable range, in every direction I looked. And no way out. And the current behind me, and the walls closing, and the scratch marks, and the silence of a canyon that something had been trying to leave for longer than I could calculate from a raft in moving water with my heart, doing something that my 11 years of experience had never required it to do before. Let me start where the day starts. Let me give you the whole morning so you feel how normal it was, how completely and ordinarily normal, before it became what it became. I am 36 years old. I have been paddling seriously since I was 25, the year I took my first whitewater certification course after a decade of casual recreational water activity and decided that casual was not the relationship I wanted with rivers. I have since certified through multiple advanced courses. I hold a Swift Water Rescue certification. I have paddled rivers in 6 different countries. And I am someone who researches a route with the thoroughness of someone who understands that whitewater research is the work you do in advance so that the river itself does not have to teach you its lessons at the moment when being taught is most dangerous. I do not get on unfamiliar water without preparation. I have planned this particular trip for 3 weeks. The river I am running is a mid-volume river in the western part of the country. A river with a documented history of recreational use. A river that has been paddled by numerous people before me and that has trip reports online going back 15 years. The section I am running is rated class 3 to 4, appropriate for my experience level, with 2 documented class 4 rapids that I have studied carefully and that I have a plan for managing solo. The route I have mapped takes me through 12 miles of river, including a canyon section that the trip reports describe as a beautiful half-mile narrows with high walls and good flow, and 1 significant drop at the exit that requires attention. The canyon section is described in every trip report I found as straightforward. In and out. Half a mile of walls, and then the exit drop, and then the river opens back up, and the last 3 miles to the takeout are easy. I put in at the launch point at 8 in the morning. It is a Tuesday in June, early enough in the season that the snowmelt is still contributing to the river's volume, the flow running at what the gauge upstream reads as medium-high for this time of year, but well within the acceptable range for the trip I have planned. The morning is cold and clear in the way of mountain mornings in early summer. the sky a blue that looks new, the banks of the river green with the specific lush green of recent melt. I run the first 4 miles with the unhurried pleasure of a good river in good conditions. The 2 Class 3 rapids come exactly where they are supposed to come and behave exactly as described. The channels I chose line up with the channels I planned. The water is clear and cold, and the canyon walls are still distant. The river still open and wide between its forested banks. I stop at a gravel bar at mile 4 and eat and drink and look at my map and check the flow of the river and confirm my position, and everything is exactly where it is supposed to be. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. The Narrows entrance is at mile 7. I know it from the map. The topographic lines converging, the river width contracting from the broad, braided channel of the upper section to the single narrow thread that the canyon forces it into. I can hear it before I see it. The sound of a canyon is distinctive, the way the walls amplify and contain the sound of the water, the way the acoustics change from the open river where sound dissipates into air and sky to the enclosed space where it bounces and concentrates. I hear it at about 300 yards out, and I begin my specific pre-canyon routine, which is to tighten my gear, check my paddle, verify my helmet and my personal flotation device, and do a final visual read of the water ahead. Everything checks. The entrance to the Narrows is clean, a smooth tongue of water funneling between 2 granite walls, no horizon line visible, which means no drop immediately inside the entrance, just the transition into the canyon. I paddle forward. The walls come up fast. At the entrance, the walls are perhaps 30 feet apart, which is narrow for a river of this volume, but not unusually so for a canyon section, and they rise vertically on both sides, the granite pale and striated with the specific geology of old stone. The walls wet at the waterline from the current spray and dry and pale above. The light inside the canyon is different from the open river. Deeper, cooler. The sky above me is a strip of blue between the walls. The current is steady and good, pushing me forward at a pace that requires minimal paddling, and the water in the canyon is fast and clean and green. I am about 100 yards in when I begin to notice the walls. Not the geology, not the natural features, the marks. They are at water level first, which is where I noticed them initially. A concentration of linear marks in the granite at the waterline, at the specific height that something in the water would reach if it were reaching toward the wall from a floating position. I register them without stopping, without categorizing them, because the river does not permit the kind of contemplative pause that categorizing things requires. I paddle and I move, and the walls slide past, and the marks at the waterline continue. They continue for 10 yards, 20, 50, and as I go deeper into the canyon and the walls slide past, I begin to see that the marks are not only at the waterline. They extend upward. A foot above the waterline, 2 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet, following the wall upward in vertical scraping patterns, in concentrated clusters, in places where the granite surface has been worked at repeatedly from the same position, scratched and then scratched again. The layer of marks deep enough in some places that the original surface color of the granite is several millimeters behind the current surface. The rock worn back by repeated contact. I am moving through the canyon looking at these walls, and I am doing the thing that my mind does when it needs to explain something, which is to look for the most available ordinary explanation and try to make it fit. Flood debris. A high water flood carrying material past at velocity, the material dragging on the walls and leaving marks. This is a real thing that happens in canyons. I know this. I apply it. It stops fitting at about the 200-yard mark. It stops fitting because of the height. The marks, which I have been tracking as I move, which I have been watching rise up the walls in the progress of the canyon, are at 20 feet above the current water level in places. Not continuous to 20 feet. concentrated at specific points on the wall, as if something was in one position, reaching as high as it could reach, marking the stone at the limit of its reach, and then the marks clustered downward again to the waterline before continuing further into the canyon. The flood debris explanation requires debris carried at a water level 20 feet above the current flow. 20 feet. The gauge upstream reads medium-high for the season, which means this is not the low point of the river's annual range. This is a significant flow, and the flood that would put water 20 feet above this level in this canyon, a flood that would fill this canyon to within 20 feet of the rim, would be an event of catastrophic magnitude, a once-in-a-century event at minimum, a recalibration of the entire watershed. And flood debris dragging on walls does not produce the pattern I am seeing. Flood debris produces horizontal marks, directional marks, marks that follow the current. What I am seeing produces vertical marks, reaching marks, things that went up the wall and not along it. I round a bend at the 300-yard mark and the canyon opens slightly. Not wide, not back to the open river, but a small oval chamber perhaps 50 feet across where the walls pull back before converging again, a natural rest point in the canyon geometry. I eddy out. I find a small flat ledge of rock at water level on the right wall, barely large enough for the raft, and I pull onto it, and I hold position with my paddle braced, and I look. I look at the walls of this small chamber, and they are covered, floor to ceiling of the reachable range. Every inch. The scratches are in every stage of depth and age, some pale and recent looking, the stone bright where it has been worked at, some dark and old, the marks weathered and filled with the black residue of years, some so deep that they have produced a groove in the granite surface that I could lay my finger in. They are not language. They are not symbols that I can organize into meaning. They are the marks of something scratching. Something that scratched at these walls with everything it had and scratched until whatever it had to scratch with was gone, or until it was gone, or until it stopped. And in the stopping left this record in the stone that I am reading now from a raft on a ledge in a canyon that the trip reports described as beautiful and straightforward. I look at the chamber wall directly in front of me, and I see something I have not seen in the canyon so far. In a section of wall at approximately head height, in a cluster of marks that is denser than the surrounding stone, there is a pattern, not language, not deliberate symbols, but a pattern of horizontal lines, parallel, evenly spaced, in groups of 4 with a diagonal 5th crossing them. The counting pattern, the prisoner's mark, 5 scratches to mark 5 units of time or 5 units of something, the most ancient and universal human system for keeping count. There are groups of these marks. I count the groups. I count them from where I am on the ledge, unable to touch the wall, counting the clusters of 5 from my position in the raft, and I count 23 groups before the pattern is interrupted by a section of wall where the rock surface has exfoliated and taken whatever was on it away. Beyond the break, the counting pattern continues in a different style, slightly larger, slightly deeper, as if whatever was marking had moved to a new tool or a new level of urgency. I count 29 more groups beyond the break. 52 groups of 5. 260 marks. 260 of something. Days. Something that was in this canyon for 260 days. Something that was in this canyon long enough to count to 260 and then stopped counting. I push off the ledge. I have a decision to make, and I am making it even as I push off, even as the current catches the raft again and begins to carry me forward. My map says the canyon exit is approximately 200 yards ahead. 200 yards of forward progress, and then the exit drop, and then I am through. I have come 300 yards already. The canyon behind me is 300 yards of moving water in a narrow channel, and going backward in it against the current is not a serious option. The only direction is forward, and forward is 200 more yards. I go forward. The canyon changes at the 400-yard mark. I feel it before I see it. The current slows. Not dramatically, not the sudden slowing of water backing up behind an obstruction, but a gradual reduction in pace, the river losing its urgency. And in a canyon section, this is not the change you want to feel, because current in a canyon is your engine, and when the engine slows, the question of what is downstream becomes more acute. I paddle and I round the next bend and I stop. The canyon ends. Not at an exit, not at the opening I have been building toward, not at the exit drop the trip reports described. The canyon ends at a wall, a transverse wall of granite, the full width of the canyon, rising from the waterline to the canyon rim, solid and unbroken, and at the base of it the water has pooled into a flat, dark, lake-like stillness. No current, no movement. The pool extends from where I have stopped to the wall, maybe 60 feet, and it is backed up and still and dark, and the wall at the end of it is, like the walls I have been passing, covered. From the waterline to the limit of what anything in the water could reach, covered in scratch marks. More concentrated here than anywhere I have seen in the canyon. Worked it more thoroughly, more urgently, with more of whatever there was to work with. The rock of the wall at the terminus of this canyon is less rock than it is scar tissue, less stone than it is record. Something was here. Something was here at this wall for a very long time. I sit in the raft in the still water, and I look at the wall, and I think. I think with the specific quality of thinking that confined spaces force, not expansive, not free-ranging, but tight and practical and urgent. The canyon behind me is the way out. The only way out. 300 yards of water flowing in the right direction, passable, manageable, my class 4 skills sufficient for the class of water in there. The current that has slowed here still moving in the right direction in the canyon behind me. I turn the raft. I begin the 300-yard upstream progress against the current that is the only way I get off this river today. The hard work of moving against the river instead of with it, and I do it. I do it with everything I have, paddling hard, finding the eddies along the wall margins where the current is weakest, working the water the way my 11 years have taught me to work it, and it takes 40 minutes to cover the 300 yards that the current covered in under 5, but I cover them. I come out of the canyon entrance into the open river, and I stop paddling, and I breathe, and I look back at the canyon mouth and the walls and the darkness inside it, and I do not go back in. I make the takeout in the early evening. I break down my raft and I load my truck and I sit in the driver's seat and I think about the wall and the counting marks and the 260. I look up the history of this river section in the following weeks, looking for the event that would explain what I saw, the flood event or the geological event or the human event, the thing that would give me context for what has been happening in that canyon for long enough to fill those walls. I find nothing relevant in the geological record. I find nothing in the flood history of the watershed. I find one thing that I cannot confidently connect but cannot ignore, which is a brief mention in a local historical record from the 19th century of a hunting party that entered a canyon on this river system and did not return. 8 men, noted in the record as lost to the river, which is the phrase that period documents used when they did not know what else to say. 8 men. And I think about 8 men in a canyon with no exit and walls and time, and the only language available to them in that place, the language of scratching, the language of making a mark to say I was here, I was counting, I was here for this many of something, and then I was not. And I think about 260 groups of 5. And I think about whether the counting continued after the rock fell away, whether there were more groups beyond the break, whether 260 was the end or just the limit of what I could see from a raft on a ledge without touching the wall. And I think about what came after the counting stopped. And I think about the wall at the end of the canyon, the terminal wall, the one covered most thoroughly of all, and I think about what it means to scratch at a wall when you have already counted to the end of your counting, and the wall does not move, and the water does not drop, and the way out has not come, and you are still there with the stone and the dark and whatever is left of what you arrived with. I think about it, and I have not been back to that river, and I do not plan to go back. And sometimes when I am in moving water and the walls come up on both sides of me and the current takes me forward and I feel that specific weight of commitment, that specific agreement with the river, I think about what it felt like to be in that still pool at the end of that canyon with nothing moving and the wall in front of me. And I make a mental note of exactly how far I have come from the entrance and whether I can make it back, and I hold that number in my head for the whole time I am between those walls, and I do not let it go until I am out. Story number 2. I want you to think about what it means to be known by something that was waiting for you before you arrived. Not followed, not watched from a distance, not tracked across a timeline that you can reconstruct. Known in advance, positioned, ready. Because that is the only way to describe what the note in my jacket pocket means. The only framework I have been able to build around it in all the time since I found it that does not collapse under the weight of what it says. I bought the jacket new. I bought it from a rack in a retail store in a shopping center in a city of 400,000 people. The specific jacket selected from 12 identical jackets on the rack. Selected because it was my size, and because I liked the color and for no other reason, selected and purchased and brought home and hung in my closet and worn 3 days later for the first time. Worn for the first time to a bar on a Friday night where I put my hand in the right-hand pocket and my fingers found paper and I pulled the paper out and I read 11 words on it that have not left me alone since. We know you found this. Not we left this for you. Not here is something we want you to know. We know you found this, which means they were watching for the finding, which means the finding was anticipated, which means something new. I would put my hand in that pocket and it was ready for the moment I did, and it wanted me to know that it knew. Before I reached in, before I found it, it already knew. Something was ready for me before I was ready for anything, and it put those words in my jacket before I bought it, and it knew I would buy it. And it knew I would reach into that pocket, and it was waiting for me to know that it knew. That is what the note says. That is the only thing the note can mean. And I need you to feel the full weight of that before I take you through the whole story. I am 29 years old. The jacket is a specific style of casual waxed cotton field jacket in an olive green color. A practical jacket. Nothing unusual about it. The kind of jacket that sits on a rack in a mid-range outdoor clothing store and that gets purchased regularly by people who want something durable and versatile. I go to the store on a Tuesday afternoon in October, not shopping specifically for a jacket. I am in the shopping center for something else, and I pass the store and I go in and I look at the jackets on a rack near the door and I find one in my size and I try it on and it fits and I like it and I buy it. This is the entirety of the decision process. There is no online research, no brand loyalty, no predetermined plan to buy this jacket. I am passing a store and I buy a jacket. The transaction is as random as a retail transaction can be. I pay by card. I take the bag home. I hang the jacket in my closet. I do not wear it on Tuesday. I do not wear it on Wednesday. I wear it for the first time on Friday when I am going out, taking it from the hanger, putting it on at my apartment door, and walking the 4 blocks to the bar where I am meeting 2 friends. I am at the bar for approximately 20 minutes. I have ordered a drink. I have found my friends at a table near the back. I am in conversation. I am warm from the walk and the people. And I reach into the right-hand pocket of the new jacket for my phone because I always put my phone in my right jacket pocket, and I am expecting to find my phone, and I find my phone, and I find something else. Paper. A small folded piece of paper against the phone. The paper smooth and dry and the fold crisp, not crumpled, not worn, Not the paper of something left accidentally by the manufacturer or caught in the lining. Folded once, a deliberate fold, a small square of paper approximately 3 inches by 3 inches folded to half that size. I take it out. I look at it. It is white paper, plain, unlined, the kind of paper you find in any home printer. I unfold it. There are 11 words written in black ink in a regular neat print, not typed, not printed by a machine, written by a hand in the specific, deliberate print of someone printing rather than writing cursively. Each letter formed separately and clearly, and the 11 words are, "We know you found this. We have been watching." I read the note twice. I hold it in the bar noise and the bar light, and I read it twice, and I put my drink down, and I look at my two friends who are talking to each other, and I say, "Wait." They look at me. I hold up the note. I tell them I found it in my jacket pocket, new jacket, first time wearing it, bought it Tuesday. They lean in and they read it. One of them laughs, the short, uncomfortable laugh of someone encountering something they don't have a category for. The other one does not laugh. She looks at the note, and then she looks at me with the expression of someone assessing whether this is a joke and determining that it is not. She says, "Is this from the jacket?" I say yes. She says, "Which store?" I tell her. She says, "Are you sure this is the right jacket? Are you sure there isn't a mix-up?" I tell her I have been wearing this jacket for the last 40 minutes, that I took it from my own closet, that I bought it 3 days ago, and it has been in my closet since. She says nothing else. She looks at the note. The note says what it says. I leave the bar early. I go home, and I take the jacket off, and I lay it on my bed, and I go through every pocket. There are 4 pockets. The right exterior pocket where I found the note, a left exterior pocket, a right interior breast pocket, and a left interior breast pocket. Right exterior, my phone, the note. Left exterior, empty. Right interior, empty. Left interior, empty. I check the lining. No tears, no holes, nothing that would allow something to have fallen in from outside. I look at the jacket as an object, as a manufactured item, and I look for anything unusual about it, and I find nothing. It is a jacket. It is a normal jacket with a note in the pocket that was there when I put it on. I go back to the store on Saturday morning. I go to the store and I find the rack where I selected the jacket, and there are still jackets on the rack in the same style, the same olive green, several remaining. I ask to speak to the manager. The manager comes out and I explain what I found, calmly, without alarm in my voice, just factual. I bought a jacket here 3 days ago, and when I wore it for the first time, I found a handwritten note in the pocket. I show her the note. She looks at it with the expression of someone encountering a workplace problem they have not encountered before. She says, "That is very unusual." She says, she is sorry. She says she cannot explain how that would have happened. The jackets come to them in sealed packaging from the manufacturer's distribution center. They are not individually inspected at the store level. They simply receive them and put them on the floor. She offers me a refund. She takes the note and reads it again. She looks at me with the note in her hand, and she says she does not know what this is. She keeps a copy. She says she will contact the manufacturer. I do not hear from her again, and I do not follow up, because within 48 hours the question of how the note got into the jacket begins to feel less important than the question of what the note means. And the question of what the note means is the one that I have been living inside for every day since. Here is what the note means if you take it at face value. If you set aside the question of mechanism, the question of how, and just read the words as words and accept them as true, here is what they say. They say that someone or something knew I would buy that jacket. They knew which jacket I would select from the rack. They knew which pocket I would put my hand into. They knew I would find the note, and they positioned the note so that when I found it, I would also find the information that they already knew I would find it. The note is not a message in the ordinary sense of a message. which is a transfer of information from a sender to a receiver. I know your name. I love you. Here is where we are meeting. The note is a demonstration. It demonstrates knowledge of something that was not yet true when the note was placed. The note was placed before I bought the jacket and before I put my hand in the pocket, and the note says we know you found this, which means that at the moment of placement they already knew the placement would succeed, already knew the finding would happen, already knew I would be standing in that bar reading those words. They knew it before I was in the store, before I was passing the store, before Tuesday, before whatever the earliest point was that this was set in motion, before the jacket was on the rack, before the note was folded and placed in the pocket by whatever hands or whatever means placed it there. I carry implications of that forward and see where they go, and where they go is deeply uncomfortable. If something knows that you will buy a specific jacket from a specific rack in a specific store on a specific afternoon, it knows your movements before you make them. It knows your decisions before you decide. It knows the future of your behavior with a precision that eliminates the possibility of coincidence and the possibility of surveillance. Surveillance can tell you where someone is, but it cannot tell you which jacket they will take from a rack, cannot tell you which pocket they will reach into first, cannot tell you these things in advance with enough certainty to write them down on paper and place the paper there and know the note will be found. That kind of knowing is something else. Something that sees the shape of what you will do before you do it. That can position things in your future because your future is already visible to it. That leaves notes in the pockets of your decisions because it already knows which pockets you will put your hands in. I have bought 5 jackets since that October. Different stores, different styles, different days, sometimes impulsive, sometimes planned. Every time, before I wear the jacket for the first time, I check the pockets. I check every pocket of every new piece of clothing before I wear it. I have found nothing in 4 of the 5. In the 5th, a gray wool coat I bought on impulse from a vintage shop 8 months after the first note, a used coat, which I know complicates things, which I know provides a mundane mechanism I cannot rule out. I found a second piece of paper. Different handwriting this time, slightly more uneven, printed in the same block style. 5 words only. 5 words in the right interior breast pocket of a gray wool coat in a vintage shop, and the 5 words are, "You are still being watched." I put the coat back on the rack. I left the shop. I did not buy the coat, and I drove home, and I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Because the complication of the vintage coat, the mundane mechanism, the previous owner who could have left a note, does not resolve the problem. Because the problem is not how the notes are getting into the pockets. The problem is that they know which pockets I will reach into. The problem is that the first note said we know you found this before I found it. The problem is that whether the mechanism is supernatural or practical, whether there are people who have arranged this or something else, something is positioning words in the path of my hands before my hands arrive, and has been doing so with enough accuracy to succeed twice, and knows, with the same accuracy that it knew both times before, whether I will put my hand in the next pocket and when, and which one, and where I will be when I do it. And I do not know how to live inside that knowledge comfortably. I do not know how to put on a coat and reach into a pocket without wondering whether the note is already there, already waiting, already known to be waiting by something that has been watching since before I knew there was anything to watch for. I check every pocket now, not with hope of finding nothing, with the specific braced attention of someone who has found things before and who understands that finding is not always up to the finder. Sometimes the finding has been arranged. Sometimes you put your hand somewhere, and what you find is what was always going to be there, placed by something that knew your hand was coming, placed and waiting in the dark of the fabric with the patience of absolute certainty. We know you found this. They knew before I did, and I have not been able to unknow that since. Story number 3. I am going to tell you something, and I need you to stay with me while I tell you the part that makes this more than a frightening night at a rest stop. Because rest stops have frightening nights. People sleep in their trucks at rest stops, and they are disturbed by other people, and sometimes those other people are threatening, and sometimes those nights become stories that you tell for years, and those stories have explanations. Those stories resolve into human behavior and human motivation and human threat, which is a category of threat that I know how to think about and have frameworks for and can place in the appropriate drawer and leave there. What I am going to tell you is not in that category. What I am going to tell you is the writing on my windshield and everything that follows from the writing on my windshield. And I need you to hold on through all of it, because the detail that makes this something other than a frightening night does not arrive until near the end. And when it arrives, I need you to already be inside the story far enough to feel its full weight. Because the writing said "Get out," written in the dust on the inside of my windshield. Inside the locked cab of my truck while I was sleeping in the back seat. Written in the dust on the inside surface of the glass in letters large enough to fill the windshield. Written from the inside, which is the side where I was, which is the side with no room for anything else because I was already there, because I was sleeping there, because the truck was locked and I was inside it, and something was also inside it, and it wrote "Get out," and I did not hear it write it, and I did not feel it, and I did not wake up until the words were already there, already finished, already waiting for me to open my eyes and find them. Here is the whole night. Here is everything. I am on a long drive. This is not a road trip in the recreational sense. I am moving, in the practical sense, relocating from one city to another for a job that starts in 4 days, and I have loaded my truck with the things that mattered most to me, and I am covering the 1,200 miles between my old city and my new one over 2 days of driving. I am a practical traveler. I do not book hotels in advance because I do not know my precise rate of progress in advance, and I do not like being beholden to a reservation when the road does what roads sometimes do. My plan is to drive until I am tired and then sleep in the truck, which I have done before on long trips, which my truck accommodates reasonably well. I have an extended cab, a rear bench seat that folds down partially flat, and a sleeping bag and pillow that I have carried for exactly this purpose for years. I have slept in this truck at rest stops and highway pull-offs and campgrounds a dozen times before without incident. This is not a thing I am doing for the first time. I leave my old city at 6 in the morning and I drive. The day is clear and I make excellent time, and by 9 in the evening I have covered 800 miles, which is strong progress. And I am tired in the specific, satisfying way of someone who has done a full day's work and is ready to stop. I am in a part of the country I have driven through before, but do not know well. Flat agricultural country, low sky, the specific nowhere quality of interstate driving far from any city, where the land is organized around function rather than around people, and the distances between any two things that resemble a destination are long. I pull into a rest stop at 9:17 p.m. It is a standard interstate rest stop, the low concrete building with the bathrooms and the vending machines, the parking area divided into sections for cars and for trucks, the lights on their tall poles turning everything beneath them into the flat orange-white of sodium vapor. It is a busy rest stop for a Tuesday night. The truck section has maybe 8 or 10 big rigs, the engines of some of them running at idle, the specific deep rumble of parked trucks that is one of the background sounds of interstate rest stops. The car section has perhaps 12 or 15 vehicles. Normal. Ordinary. The specific populated anonymity of a rest stop on a major interstate. The kind of place where nobody knows anyone and everyone is between somewhere and somewhere else, and the only common ground is the pause. I park in the car section toward the far end of the lot, away from the building and the lights, because I am planning to sleep and the lights closest to the building are too bright for sleeping. I use the bathroom. I buy a coffee from the vending machine that I do not drink, but that I carry back to the truck because I have learned that I sleep better knowing the coffee is there for the morning. I get back in my truck. I move my overnight bag from the passenger seat to the front floor. I fold the rear bench as flat as it goes. I unroll my sleeping bag. I set an alarm for 6 a.m. on my phone. I plug my phone into the charger. I lock the truck. I press the lock button on the door. I hear the click of all 4 locks engaging. I check the driver's door by pulling the handle, locked, and I climb into the back and I get in my sleeping bag and I close my eyes. It is 9:41 p.m. by my phone screen. I am asleep within 20 minutes. I know this because I am good at sleeping in vehicles, have always been. The movement of the truck earlier in the day leaves a kind of residual kinetic fatigue that makes sleep in vehicles come easily even after the vehicle has stopped. I wake at 2:11 a.m. I wake not to my alarm and not to a sound I can identify in retrospect, but to the specific quality of consciousness that means something has changed. Something in the environment of my sleeping has shifted from what it was when I fell asleep. I am in my sleeping bag on the rear bench of my locked truck in a rest stop in the flat middle of the country, and I am awake, and the first thing I do is look at the windshield. The letters are large, each one perhaps 8 inches high, filling the full width of the windshield in a single line, written in the thin gray of disturbed dust on glass, written with something narrow, a finger perhaps, pressed firmly enough to move the dust cleanly, leaving each letter in the specific clarity of intentional mark-making. The letters are written from behind them, from the outside perspective, which means that reading them from the inside, from where I am lying in my sleeping bag in the back seat looking forward through the cab at the windshield, they read correctly. They read "Get out." Written to be read by someone inside the truck looking at the windshield from inside. Written in the correct orientation for the inside reader. Written on the inside surface of the glass. I do not move for a period of time I cannot accurately measure, but that feels long. I am in my sleeping bag, and I am completely still, and I am looking at the words, and I am doing the assessment that a rational person in a frightening situation does. The rapid inventory of what is real and what is the product of disrupted sleep, and what can be explained and what cannot. The words are real. I can read them clearly in the rest stop sodium light that comes through the windshield. Get out. 2 words on the inside of my windshield. I am alone in this truck. I am not alone. I check without moving. I check with my eyes from where I am lying. I sweep the cab interior with my vision from the rear bench, and the front seats are empty, and the front passenger footwell is empty, and I cannot see the rear passenger footwell from this angle, but the rear passenger footwell is a space the size of a shoebox and is occupied by a pile of bags, and nothing else could be in it. I am alone in this truck, and there are words on my windshield written from the inside. I sit up. I sit up slowly, and I reach forward between the front seats, and I press the lock button again, the one on the center console. Even though the truck was already locked, I press it and hear the chunk of the locks confirming their engagement, all 4 of them locked. I look at the words from a sitting position, and they are what they are. I look at the passenger door window. I look at the driver's door window. I look at the back window. Nothing on any of them, just the windshield. Just get out, in the specific place on the windshield that you look at when you are looking forward from the back seat. In the place where the message is legible from where I was sleeping, legible and clear and directed at me. I start the truck. I do not get out of the truck. I am aware of the instruction in the message, and I am aware that the instruction says to do exactly what my body is also saying to do, and I am aware that there is something deeply wrong about complying with a message written on the inside of my windshield by something I cannot account for in my locked truck. That complying might be exactly what the message is designed to produce. That outside the truck might be the less safe option. I start the truck from the back seat. climbing forward into the driver's seat without unlocking the doors, without opening anything, and I put it in drive, and I leave the rest stop. I drive. I drive for 40 minutes before I pull over at a lit highway service area, and I park under the lights, and I get out of the truck in the lit area with other people visible through the windows of the service building, and I walk around the truck. I am looking for two things. I am looking for the evidence of entry, a door lock that has been tampered with, a window seal that has been compromised, anything that tells me how something got inside. And I am looking at the outside of the windshield, because the question that my mind has been building toward for the last 40 minutes of driving, the question that I have been not asking because I did not want to be driving when I asked it, is this. If the words are on the inside surface of the glass, what is on the outside surface? The outside surface of the glass, in the dust and the road film that accumulates on any vehicle in highway driving, is an undisturbed record of everything that touched it. I have not run my wipers. I have not washed the glass. The outside surface is as it was. I stand in front of my truck in the light of the highway service area, and I look at the outside of the windshield. The outside surface has road film and dust in the specific uniform layer of a vehicle that has been driving all day. And on the outside surface there are no marks, no handprints, no evidence of anything pressing from the outside against the glass. The outside surface is undisturbed, perfectly, completely undisturbed, which means the inside surface was marked from the inside, which I already knew, which I was already certain of because I know which side the dust was on when I read the message from my sleeping bag. But the outside being undisturbed eliminates the last remaining mundane scenario. It eliminates the possibility of someone pressing from outside hard enough to disturb the inside surface without touching the outside, which would not have been physically possible anyway, but which my frightened mind was trying to construct as a theory during the drive. The outside is clean. The words are on the inside. The truck was locked. I was inside. The words were written while I was inside. I drive the rest of the way to my new city without stopping, arriving at 7 in the morning on empty and adrenaline, and I sleep for 4 hours in my new apartment on a mattress on the floor before I am functional enough to think. When I think in a specific direction. I think toward the question that has been underneath everything since I drove away from that rest stop, the question that I have been circling without landing on, the question that is more frightening than get out on a windshield, more frightening than an unexplained presence, more frightening than the locked truck and the undisturbed outside and all of it. The question is, why get out? What was the instruction for? Was it a warning? Something trying to protect me from something outside the truck? Something in the rest stop parking lot that posed a threat greater than the message itself? Or was it something else? Was it the request of something that wanted the space? Something that was already in the truck, already in the locked cab with me while I slept, that wrote the words not as a warning to me, but as a request, as a way of saying this space is occupied, as a way of saying I was here first, as a way of saying to the sleeping person in the sleeping bag in the back seat of a truck at a rest stop at 2 in the morning what any tenant says to an intruder, that this place is taken, that I belong here, that you are the one who needs to leave. I drive a different vehicle now. I bought it 3 months after the move, traded in the truck, told the dealer it had been a good truck, but I needed a change. I did not explain further. The new vehicle is clean. No history, no miles on it before mine, no rest stops accumulated in it, nothing in it before I put things in it. I have not slept in it at a rest stop. I do not plan to. When I drive long distances now, I book hotels in advance, specific hotels, non-negotiable stops, places with rooms I can lock and lights I can control and windows I can verify from the inside. I sleep in beds. I sleep with my keys on the nightstand. I check the windows before I sleep, and I check the mirrors. I do not put myself in a position where I am enclosed and sleeping and something can be in the enclosed space with me, and the only way I find out is to wake up at 2 in the morning and read what it left me on the glass. I am very careful about that now. I am careful about enclosed spaces and sleeping and the specific vulnerability of being in a locked thing and trusting the lock to mean you are alone inside it. Because a lock keeps things out. A lock does not verify what was already in before you turn the key. A lock does not check the back seat. A lock does not look at the windshield from the inside before you close your eyes and assume the truck is empty. I check now. Every time, without exception, before I close my eyes anywhere, I check. And when I drive past rest stops on long highway miles in the dark, when I see the sodium lights and the parked trucks and the ordinary anonymous pause of people between somewhere and somewhere else, I keep driving. I keep driving and I do not slow down and I do not pull in. And I think about 2 words on a windshield and the space behind them and the dark of the cab and something in it that knew how to write and knew what it wanted and waited, patient and quiet and present, until I was asleep enough to say it.